One look changed everything. The master's sister and the slave who owned her heart. In the summer of 1838, one quiet look changed two lives forever. It happened on a wide southern estate, where rules were strict and hearts were never meant to speak. A young slave carried more pain than words could hold. A woman arrived with secrets in her eyes and hope she did not yet understand. No one planned for love. No one expected truth to rise. But when their eyes met, the world shifted. This is a story about silence, courage, and a bond that grew where it was never allowed to exist. If you enjoy stories that stay with you long after they end, please like this story and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep these stories alive. The estate of Briarwood stood tall among fields of cotton and old oak trees. Life there moved slow, but heavy. Every morning began with bells and orders. Every night ended with tired bodies and silent prayers. Jonah was one of the slaves born on that land. He was quiet, strong, and careful with his words. He had learned early that silence kept him safe. Still, his eyes noticed everything. He saw sadness where others saw duty. He felt things he never spoke aloud. Margaret Hawthorne was the master's wife. She ruled the house with calm hands and a gentle voice. She was kind in small ways, but bound by the same rules that trapped everyone else. Her life looked full, yet her heart felt empty. One morning, a carriage arrived carrying Silva Hawthorne, the master's younger sister. She came from the city, carrying books, questions, and a past she never explained. From the moment Silva stepped down, Jonah felt something shift inside him. He did not know her story. He only knew that one look from her felt like the start of something dangerous and real. And so, without meaning to, fate began its slow work. Life at Briarwood returned to its usual rhythm, but something unseen had changed. The fields still stretched wide under the sun. The bells still rang at dawn. Orders were still given and followed. Yet beneath all of it, a quiet tension began to grow, slow and steady, like a storm far away. Silva Hawthorne spent her first days walking the estate. She asked questions no one else ever asked. She noticed things others ignored. She spoke kindly to the house staff and nodded to the field hands, even when they looked down instead of meeting her eyes. This alone made her different. Jonah noticed her from a distance. He was often near the main house, carrying water, fixing fences, or helping with horses. He never lingered. He never stared. Still, his eyes followed her when he thought no one was watching. There was something in the way she moved, like she was searching for something she had lost. Silva noticed him too. At first, it was small things. The way Jonah always stepped aside to let her pass. The way he lowered his head, yet somehow still saw everything. Once, when she dropped a book on the porch steps, Jonah picked it up before anyone else could. Their fingers brushed for a brief second. "I'm sorry," Silva said softly. Jonah nodded. "Yes, miss." That was all. But the moment stayed with both of them longer than it should have. Margaret, the master's wife, watched these moments closely. She had lived long enough on the estate to sense when trouble was coming. She saw the way Silva's eyes followed Jonah. She saw the way Jonah grew tense whenever Silva was near. Margaret felt a strange mix of worry and understanding. She herself had once believed love could be simple. One afternoon, Margaret asked Silva to help her sort letters in the sitting room. The windows were open, and the sound of work drifted in from outside. "You seem restless," Margaret said gently. Silva paused. "Do I?" "Yes," Margaret replied. "You walk like someone trying to outrun their thoughts." Silva smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "I suppose I am not used to quiet places." Margaret studied her. Quiet places can be loud if you listen closely. Outside, Jonah passed by with a basket of tools. He heard nothing of their words, but he felt the weight of the house pressing down on him more than usual. As days turned into weeks, Silva found reasons to be near the back paths and shaded trees where Jonah often worked. She told herself it was curiosity. She told herself it was kindness. Yet her heart knew better. One evening, she wandered near the old oak by the creek. Jonah was there, repairing a broken fence rail. He stiffened when he saw her. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said carefully. "I could say the same to you," Silva replied. Jonah shook his head. "It's not the same." Silva stepped closer, keeping a safe distance. "You speak as if the rules were written into the ground." "They might as well be," Jonah said quietly. For a moment, neither spoke. The air felt heavy, full of words left unsaid. "You never look angry," Silva said at last. "Not even when you should." Jonah gave a small, sad smile. "Anger costs too much." Silva felt that answer settled deep in her chest. She wanted to ask more. She wanted to say his name. But she knew better. From that day on, their meetings became unspoken habits. A glance near the well. A shared silence by the fence. Nothing improper. Nothing open. Yet everything dangerous. Rumors, however, have a way of growing without proof. Some of the workers began to notice. Some whispered warnings to Jonah. Others watched Silva with sharp eyes. The estate had seen many secrets before, and none of them ended well. Margaret sensed it too. One night, she called Jonah into the house to fix a loose stair rail. Silva happened to be in the room, reading near the fireplace. Margaret spoke calmly. "Jonah, you do your work well." "Thank you, ma'am." She looked at him carefully. "Good work keeps people safe." Jonah understood the meaning beneath her words. "Yes, ma'am." Silva lowered her book. Their eyes met briefly, and in that second, fear and longing mixed together. Later that night, Silva could not sleep. She sat at her desk, staring at a blank page. She had come to Briarwood to escape old pain, but instead she had found something new, something that asked too much of her. Jonah, lying in his small quarters, stared at the ceiling. He told himself to forget her. He reminded himself of the cost. Yet every memory of her voice, her questions, her quiet courage pulled him deeper. The breaking point came during a sudden storm. Rain poured hard, turning paths into mud. A tree near the creek fell, blocking part of the fence line. Jonah was sent to check the damage. Silva, unaware, had gone walking before the rain grew heavy. When Jonah found her standing near the fallen tree, soaked and shaken, his heart stopped. "You shouldn't be here," he said urgently. "I didn't know the storm would come so fast," she replied, her voice trembling. Thunder cracked overhead. Without thinking, Jonah led her to a small shed nearby. It was empty, dark, and dry. They stood there, close but not touching. Rain hammered the roof. The world outside faded away. "I never meant to cause trouble," Silva whispered. Jonah swallowed hard. "That doesn't stop trouble from coming." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "Do you ever wish things were different?" Jonah hesitated. "Every day." Silva's eyes filled with tears. "So do I." For a moment, it felt like time held its breath. Jonah stepped back, forcing distance between them. "We can't," he said softly. "No matter how it feels." Silva nodded, though her heart broke a little. "I know." When the storm passed, they left separately, carrying the weight of what had almost been said. But the estate had felt the shift. Something was coming. Choices would soon have to be made. And love, once awakened, does not return quietly to sleep. The tension at Briarwood no longer hid itself. It moved through the air like heat before a fire. People spoke less. Eyes watched more. Even the land seemed to hold its breath. Silva felt it everywhere she went. In the long halls, at the dinner table, in the quiet moments before sleep. She knew she was standing at the edge of something that could not be undone. Jonah felt it too. His body worked as always, but his mind was never still. Every sound made him turn. Every shadow made him careful. He knew how quickly a life could change on this land. The day everything broke began like any other. The master announced a small gathering that evening. Neighbors would come. Food would be served. Music would play. It was meant to show strength and order. Margaret prepared the house, giving instructions with her calm voice, but her eyes carried worry. Silva dressed slowly that evening. She stood before the mirror, staring at her reflection. She did not look like someone about to lose everything. She looked like any other woman preparing for supper. That frightened her most. As guests arrived, Jonah moved between tasks near the back of the house. He kept his head down, but he could feel Silva's presence even without seeing her. During the gathering, one of the guests, a sharp-eyed man with too much curiosity, noticed Silva watching the yard more than the room. "Is something out there more interesting than us?" he asked with a light laugh. Silva forced a smile. "Fresh air is a habit I haven't broken." Margaret heard the exchange. Her grip tightened on her glass. She knew that tone. She had heard it once before, long ago, when her own heart had learned its limits. Later that night, music drifted through the open windows. Laughter followed. But outside, near the stables, Jonah was called away by a sudden order. A fence had been cut. Someone said a slave might be planning to run. Fear moved fast on Briarwood. Lanterns were lit. Voices rose. Men gathered, searching, guessing, blaming. Jonah stood still, knowing that fear often needed no truth to grow. Silva heard the noise and slipped away from the guests. She followed the sound, her heart racing. She found Jonah near the stable, surrounded by raised voices. "He was near the fence earlier," someone said. "That doesn't mean anything," Jonah replied, steady but firm. Silva stepped forward before she could stop herself. "He was helping me earlier," she said. "I asked him to." Silence fell. All eyes turned to her, then to Jonah. Margaret arrived moments later, sensing disaster. She looked from Silva to Jonah and understood everything in a single breath. The master's voice cut through the night. "Silva, inside." "No!" She did not move. "I said now." Jonah looked at her, his eyes filled with warning. "Please," he said quietly. "Go!" But Silva shook her head. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. "This is my fault, not his." The master stepped closer. What fault would that be? The truth pressed against her chest, heavy and burning. She felt years of silence push back. "I care for him," Silva said. "More than I should. More than I am allowed." Gasps filled the air. Someone whispered a prayer. Someone else turned away. Jonah felt the ground drop beneath him. Silva, no. But it was too late. The master's face hardened. "You will go inside," he said to Silva, his voice cold. "And you will stay there." Then he turned to Jonah. "As for you, this ends now." Margaret stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. "This will solve nothing." The master ignored her. "Take him away." Hands grabbed Jonah's arms. He did not fight. He only looked at Silva, his eyes full of regret and something deeper, love, plain and painful. Silva tried to move toward him, but Margaret held her back. "If you act now," Margaret whispered, "it will only make it worse." Tears streamed down Silva's face as Jonah was taken away. That night, Briarwood did not sleep. Silva sat alone in her room, her heart pounding. She had spoken the truth aloud, and it had shattered everything. She did not know what would happen to Jonah. She did not know what would happen to herself. She only knew that silence was no longer possible. Margaret came to her before dawn. "You have crossed a line that cannot be erased," Margaret said softly. "I know," Silva replied. "I would do it again." Margaret studied her. "Do you understand what this means for him?" Silva's voice broke. "I do." Margaret closed her eyes. She thought of her own past, of choices she had not made. When she opened them again, something had changed. "There may be one way," she said slowly, "but it will cost us all." Meanwhile, Jonah sat in a locked shed, alone with his thoughts. Fear pressed in from all sides, but beneath it was something steady. She had spoken. She had chosen truth, and that mattered. As the sun rose over Briarwood, nothing was the same. The rules had been challenged. The truth had been spoken. And love, once hidden, now stood in full light, dangerous, exposed, and impossible to ignore. Morning came to Briarwood in a strange way. The sun rose, the birds sang, and the bells rang as they always had. Yet nothing felt the same. The air carried weight. Every step echoed louder than before. Silva did not leave her room. The door remained closed, but she heard everything: the quiet orders, the low voices, the way people avoided the upper floor. She sat by the window, hands folded, replaying the night over and over. Speaking the truth had felt like freedom for one breath. Now it felt like a storm that refused to pass. Jonah was released from the shed at dawn. He was not sent to the fields. Instead, he was told to wait near the barn. No explanation. No promise. Waiting was often the hardest punishment of all. Margaret moved through the house with purpose. She had slept little. Her mind had been busy weighing risk against conscience. She had lived too long following rules written by others. Last night had reopened a door she thought she had closed forever. She went first to the master. "This cannot be handled with anger," she said calmly. He scoffed. "It already has been mishandled." "It has been revealed," Margaret replied. "There is a difference." He turned away from her. "Your sister crossed a line." "So did the system that put us all here," Margaret said quietly. He did not answer. Later, Margaret found Silva still seated by the window. "You may not like what I suggest," Margaret said. Silva looked up. "I will accept anything if it keeps Jonah safe." Margaret nodded. "That tells me all I need to know." She explained her plan slowly. It was not perfect. It was risky. But it was the only path she could see. Jonah would be sent away from Briarwood, not as punishment, but as protection. A distant cousin in the north needed labor. The papers could be arranged. The distance would quiet the talk. Time would cool tempers. Silva listened, her heart breaking with every word. "Will I ever see him again?" Margaret hesitated. "I don't know." Silva closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Then do it, please." Jonah was told the decision that afternoon. He stood still as Margaret spoke, his face unreadable. "You will leave tonight," she said. "It is the only way." He nodded slowly. "And her?" "She will be watched closely," Margaret said. "But she will be safe." Jonah swallowed hard. "Then I will go." Before sunset, Silva insisted on seeing him once more. Margaret allowed it, under watchful eyes, near the edge of the orchard. They stood facing each other, the space between them filled with things they could not say. "I'm sorry," Silva whispered. Jonah shook his head. "You gave me something most people never do. Truth." She reached out, stopping just short of touching his hand. "I wish the world were kinder." "So do I," he said. They shared one last look, long, full, and final. Then footsteps approached, and the moment was gone. That night, Jonah left Briarwood under a moonless sky. No goodbyes. No sound. Only the road ahead and a heart heavy with love. Days passed. Silva followed the rules placed upon her. She attended meals. She spoke politely, but her laughter never returned. People noticed the change. Some pitied her. Others judged. None truly understood. Margaret watched her closely. "You are grieving," she said one evening. "I am learning to live with it," Silva replied. Meanwhile, news traveled slowly. Letters came and went. Margaret read one in secret and burned it after. Jonah was alive. He was working. He was safe, for now. That knowledge kept Silva standing. The master believed the problem had been solved. Order restored. Yet even he sensed something had shifted. Authority felt weaker when truth had been spoken aloud. One afternoon, months later, Silva sat beneath the old oak by the creek, the place where so much had begun. She held a small book Jonah had once returned to her. Inside, pressed between pages, was a single dried leaf. A memory. Margaret joined her. "You still believe in him," she said. Silva nodded. "I believe in who we were when we were honest." Margaret sat beside her. "Then perhaps that honesty has not ended." The wind moved through the trees. The creek whispered its steady song. Briarwood stood as it always had, but its walls now held cracks, small ones, maybe, but real. The falling action had begun. The storm had passed, but its damage remained. Lives had been bent. Hearts had been tested. And somewhere far away, Jonah walked under a different sky, carrying the same love, the same memory, and a quiet hope that refused to die. Months had passed since Jonah left Briarwood. The estate had returned to its daily rhythm, but for Silva, nothing felt normal. Each morning, she walked through the halls, the gardens, the same rooms she had known her entire life, yet she carried a quiet emptiness inside. Every laugh sounded hollow. Every friendly word felt like a reminder of what was missing. Margaret noticed the change. She had never seen her sister so silent for so long. One afternoon, she approached Silva in the library, where sunlight pooled across the worn wooden floor. "You are carrying more than grief," Margaret said softly. "You are carrying hope too, whether you realize it or not." Silva looked up, her eyes weary but steady. "I think about him every day. I worry that the world will be too cruel, that what we felt was only a dream." Margaret took her hand. "Love like that is never just a dream. It leaves a mark. It changes who we are. Even apart, it is real." Silva held her sister's gaze, letting the words sink in. For the first time in months, she felt something lighter, a tiny thread of courage. Far away, Jonah worked on his new estate. The work was hard, the days long, but he never allowed his mind to stop carrying Silva. Every evening, when the sun dipped low, he would write letters he could not send, pouring all his love and longing onto paper. He dreamed of a day when he could see her again, when they could speak without fear, without rules pressing down on them. Back at Briarwood, life moved forward. Guests visited, chores were done, orders were given and obeyed. The estate appeared calm and orderly, yet inside, both Silva and Margaret felt the quiet undercurrent of a love that had shaken the very foundation of their world. One spring morning, a letter arrived for Silva. Margaret handed it to her with a small, encouraging smile. Silva's hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable, Jonah's. "I am safe. I think of you always. One day, we will find a way to meet again. Until then, hold on to your courage. Hold on to us." Tears filled Silva's eyes, not of sadness, but of relief. His words were a promise. His words were a lifeline. That night, Silva walked to the old oak by the creek, the place where Jonah had once saved her from the storm, where their secret moments had begun, and where their hearts had first spoken to each other. She held the book he had returned to her, and in it, the pressed leaf, a symbol of enduring hope. Margaret joined her without a word. Together, they watched the creek, the water moving steadily, never stopping, always carrying life forward. "You've grown stronger," Margaret said softly. "I have," Silva replied, "but it is because I have something to fight for, even from afar." The seasons changed. Silva wrote letters in return, careful, slow, filled with her own thoughts and fears. The correspondence was a secret lifeline, a way to sustain what the estate tried to control, what the rules tried to bury. Jonah, too, wrote cautiously, keeping himself safe while keeping the bond alive. Every word he sent was a thread, weaving them closer despite the distance. Then, one evening, news arrived that would change everything again. A distant relative of the master had decided to sell part of the estate, including the land Jonah now worked. The sale meant freedom, a legal, undeniable freedom. Margaret had learned of it in secret and quickly told Silva. "It is the chance we have been waiting for," Margaret said. "The chains that bound him will finally fall." Silva's heart raced. Hope, once fragile, now burned bright. She imagined seeing him again, standing together without fear, without barriers. Weeks later, under the warmth of a summer afternoon, Jonah returned to Briarwood, not as a servant, not as a hidden love, but free and equal in every way that mattered. Silva waited beneath the old oak, her hands clutching the book, her heart pounding with anticipation. When he appeared, their eyes met, and the world seemed to stop. Years of longing, fear, and hidden love were contained in that single glance. Jonah walked slowly toward her, his face lined with the hardships of the journey but brightened by the sight of her. "Silva," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Jonah," she replied, her voice trembling. They met in the middle of the clearing, under the wide branches of the oak, and finally allowed themselves to embrace. No words were necessary. The years of waiting, of risk, and of hidden love spoke through the hold, the warmth, and the tears. Margaret watched from a distance, a smile on her lips. She had done what she could to protect them, to guide them toward a future they deserved. Seeing Silva and Jonah together, free, was the reward of every risk, every secret, every quiet decision she had made. From that day forward, life at Briarwood changed. Rules still existed, but hearts had found freedom. Jonah and Silva built their lives slowly, carefully, savoring each moment together. The letters that had kept them alive in spirit were now words spoken face to face. They worked the land, but now with partnership and respect, not fear or secrecy. They laughed in the sunlight. They shared quiet evenings beneath the trees. And though the estate still had its demands, the moments of stolen time were no longer forbidden, they were theirs. And so Briarwood, once a place of rules and chains, became a place of hope. Silva and Jonah proved that love could endure distance, danger, and years of waiting. It could survive storms, silence, and fear. And it could flourish, against all odds, in a world determined to hold it back. Under the same sky that had once separated them, they found each other again. And for the first time, the estate held no power over their hearts. They were free, together, and finally whole. The years that followed at Briarwood were quiet in the best way. Silva and Jonah lived side by side, their love no longer hidden or forbidden. Every morning, they walked through the fields together, the sun warming their faces, the breeze carrying the scent of cotton and earth. Life was still hard at times, but the weight of secrecy had lifted. Silva often thought back to that first look, the one that had changed everything. A glance that had sparked fear, longing, and courage all at once. She smiled, remembering how fragile it had seemed, how impossible, and yet how it had grown into something unbreakable. Jonah stood beside her now, steady and strong, a living reminder that patience, hope, and honesty could withstand even the harshest trials. They spoke little about the past, not because it was forgotten, but because the present was brighter, and the future wide open. Margaret watched them from the house, pride and quiet relief filling her heart. She knew she had helped guide them, but the true magic had come from their courage, their patience, and their love. And so, beneath the same old oak tree where their story began, Silva and Jonah finally had the life they had dreamed of, free, together, and unafraid.